Welcome back, friends. Today we're going to be talking about Virtual World. That's right. This is a deck that's near and dear to my heart. I picked the core up when it was new. I think I spent like 25 bucks on it off of ygodaily.com. I'll go ahead and give a bit of an overview of what the deck can do, what to expect if you're playing against it, and what each of the cards do. Not necessarily in that order. Let's start by looking at these four monsters. Now, these four monsters all have something very key in common, and that's that they all share the virtual world summoning condition. I'll go ahead and pull one up so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. The summoning condition is fairly straightforward. You target a virtual world card you control, and then you send a card of a different type, monster, spell, or trap, from the deck to the grave, and then you summon it and you get a bonus effect. So if you control a monster, you can send a spell or trap. If you control a trap, you can send a spell or monster, so on, etc. You get the idea. These four are free summons. You can hypothetically normal summon one of the level 3s if you're in a pinch, you need something on field, but your hope is to get a spell or trap on the field so you can start sending some of the monsters to the grave and start using some of their powerful effects, getting things in rotation, getting the ball rolling, so on and so forth. I'll go ahead and go over each of them. I'm going to skip over most of the summoning effect because you already know it and I don't feel like repeating myself. This one allows you to add a card of the third type. So if you target a monster, send a spell, you can add a trap. Target a trap, send a spell, you can add a monster, so on and so forth. Pretty straightforward. This one lets you add a monster from grave to your hand during the end phase. Much like Skarm, you are going to forget this constantly because it is an optional effect in the end phase. This one lets you send a second card of the third type. So, much like Lulu, target a spell, send a monster, send a trap, so on and so forth. You get the idea. Lao Lao lets you summon another virtual world from the grave that does not share a name with the card you sent to the graveyard. So if you target a spell and then send a Gigi, you can't reborn a Gigi. You have to reborn a Lily, a Lulu, or one of the other ones that I haven't shown yet. This one is extremely powerful, and this one is extremely powerful. These two are kind of the backbones of the deck. This one increases your consistency. You want access to this ASAP because you want to be able to search your deck for whatever piece you're missing. This one gives you access to more bodies on field. It basically raises the ceiling on the number of summons you can make and raises the ceiling on the number of synchros and Xyzs you can make. Spoilers, this deck makes almost exclusively synchros and Xyzs. These two are extremely powerful. Lily is probably a close third. The ability to send another card can be extremely powerful, especially in scenarios where you don't necessarily have access to a lot of resources. You can target a monster, send a spell, send a trap. Both of those cards are going to have powerful effects in the grave. You get the idea. You want things in the grave because not only can these cards send cards to the grave, but the deck is built in such a way where the cards want to be in the grave. Gigi is the worst of the four that has this specific summoning effect. It's still good. It's good for follow-up. You basically summon it and then you add back the Lulu in the end phase if you got access to it, Lao Lao if you did not, and Lily if you're down bad. But this card's good, but it's the worst of the four. And now onto the monsters that don't fit that mold. These two don't really fit into either of those camps. Nian Yan was in the first wave of support. This card says that if it's in the graveyard when a level 3 is normal or special summoned, you can special this from the grave and it becomes a tuner, but banish it when it leaves the field. And if this card is banished, you can shuffle a banished card back into the deck. And bear in mind, it says a banished card. It does not specify what type of card it has to be. So it can be a face down card, meaning this deck is extremely good at playing Desires, even if you're playing Garnets, because you get access to Nian Yan, summon it, banish it, it returns one of your banished cards off of Desires back to the deck. There are extremely big scenarios where this card can save you. And In longer, grindier games, this card allows you to recur resources from the banish pile. So this card's honestly the strongest of the two non-send to grave to summon monsters. 2/2 is the worst of the two, but it's still really good. You can normal summon it without tributing if all the monsters you control are psychic or worm, or you control no monsters. And if this card is in the grave, you can discard a psychic or worm and special it as a tuner, but banish it when it leaves the field. And I didn't mention this before, but pretty much all of these have conditions when you activate their effects to summon them, where you lock yourself into 3 or higher level or rank. So you can only summon synchros, exes, or main deck monsters. And they have to be 3 or higher. They don't have to be 3 or 6 or 9 or 12 or whatever. They don't have to be multiples of 3, but they can't be lower than 3. This one does represent an extender, so it technically raises the ceiling on the number of summons you can make, but it's extremely bad to draw for the most part. You don't necessarily want to see it in your opening hand. You more so want to like send it off of a Lily or, something like that. Now let's go ahead and get into the spells and traps. I'm going to start with the card that kind of, paves the way for what's coming next. Kowloon, fun fact, when I first started playing this game, I thought this was a field spell. Obviously, there's no field spell logo on it, but when I saw people using it, they used it like it was a field spell. Maybe not putting it in the field zone, but the way they talked about it was like it was a field spell. And I mean, come on, it's a city. Cities are field spells. But anyway, I digress. This card only has one effect that matters. You see those bullet points? See how they got numbers next to them? You're never going to use any of that. You can read those on your own time, but I'm going to skip over them because I have played this deck for dozens of games and never had any of those come up. They do come up on extremely rare fringe cases, but for the most part, you're only activating this for one effect. You activate it, you can take a Virtual World Gate card and place it in your spell and trap zone face up. That's it. The reason why this is so powerful is because, and you may have figured this out, when you're looking at these, they all have effects where you can send cards from deck to grave other than the type of card that you target on field. This allows you to get a spell or trap on field for these to target so that they can start sending monsters. Monsters like these two. You're starting to see where this is going. And on top of that, you do play traps. So this gives you access to activating your traps turn 1 without having to worry about setting them and then flipping them and, being slow. Now let's talk about the gates. All 3 of these have effects on field. This one banishes a virtual world to negate a card on field. This one lets you shuffle 2 banished cards back into the deck to pop a card. This one changes battle positions. They also all 3 have effects that banish themselves from grave. This one banishes itself to search a virtual world monster and then you discard a card. This one allows you very easy access to a lot of your main deck monsters. This basically almost always searches Lulu unless you drew it. This one allows you to target a virtual world monster you control and either increase its level by 3 or decrease its level by 3. This one allows you to get into the higher level synchros even when you don't get access to the higher level main deck monsters. It also allows you to more easily control the levels of synchros and exes that you're summoning and allows you to sort of control things more easily. This one summons a virtual world and then you discard a card. This one represents yet another summon, which means that it raises the ceiling on the number of summons you can make and raises the ceiling on the number of monsters you can end on. Now that we've talked about the spells and traps, let's go ahead and move on to the extra deck. Let's go ahead and start with the bad ones. We'll go ahead and start with these 2. These ones don't even see play in the deck. I couldn't tell you what they do off the top of my head, and what they do doesn't really matter. You can kind of read them if you would like, decide if you want to play them. You're probably not going to. I'm just going to set them aside. These 2 are a little better. I actually play these in my version of Virtual World, and they've both come up on occasion. This one has an effect where it cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects if you have 2 or more monsters in your graveyard with the same type and attribute but different names. And then you can banish 2 monsters from your graveyard with the same type and attribute but different names. Then target a card on the field, send it to the grave. It does target, but it's non-destruction removal, which means it's extremely powerful, and it's a level 6 generic synchro, so it's extremely easy to summon. Fan is a level 6 Xyz. It's a little harder to summon, and it says once per turn you can detach 2 materials from this card, target a face-up card your opponent controls, and 1 card in either grave, banish them. So this card, again, removal. Non-destruction removal too. And if this Xyz summon card is destroyed by battle with an opponent's attacking monster or by an opponent's card effect while in its owner's monster zone, you can special summon 2 virtual world monsters with the same type and attribute from your deck, but they have to have different names. Actually, maybe they don't. You know what? I don't know. It doesn't say they have to have different names, so maybe they don't. Doesn't really matter. That effect doesn't usually come up. But the effect to banish things does come up. And it's a 2600 attack beater, so sometimes you just summon it to attack over something. And now, for the bread and butter of this deck, the card that really just makes this deck worth playing, Virtual World Kyuubi Shenshen. This card is insane. Honestly, there's an argument to be made to play this deck just because it can play this card and take full advantage of all of its effects. So let's go ahead and read these together. Any card sent from the field to the grave is banished instead. Okay, well, it's worth playing. Don't need to read anything else. Just kidding. We're going to continue reading on because it gets crazier. And you can only use each of the following effects once per turn. When a monster declares an attack, you can return a banished monster from the owner to the owner's graveyard. That's interesting. It allows you to recur some of your resources if you're going for an attack, but you're not going for game. Not usually going to come up. If you're attacking, you're probably either making Zeus or winning. So that effect very rarely comes up. And then there's the last effect. During your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, banish 2 other monsters from your graveyard with different original types and attributes from each other. Special this card from the grave. So not only is this card big, it's got 2800 attack. It has a built-in floodgate effect that sends all cards from the field to the grave to the banish pile instead. It also has the ability to summon itself back if your opponent manages to out it. This card is exceptionally strong. And, there's arguments to play this in decks other than Virtual World. But for the most part, this card sees pretty extensive play in Virtual World specifically. And with the new Kashtira stuff coming out and the fact that Arise Heart is such a powerful card with built-in macro effect as well, I mean, this card kind of paved the way for Arise Heart, right? It is standing on the shoulders of Shenshen and Darklaw. It didn't take me very long to explain what these cards did, but I feel like the best way to learn what they do is to just play with them. But I'm not expecting all of you to go out and invest in a Virtual World core just to learn how to play this deck that hasn't been meta for like 3 years. So I'll just go ahead and kind of show you a very basic combo. We'll start with Lulu and Kowloon. We'll go ahead and activate the Kowloon so that we can activate the Chuche from deck. We will Lulu targeting the Chuche. We will send Kinglong to the grave, summon it, and then we will go ahead and add the Lily to hand. We will Lily targeting the Chuche, or we will Lily targeting, the Chuche. We will go ahead and send a Yan Yan, summon, and then as the extra send, we will go ahead and send a second Kinglong for next turn. Now, things start to diverge pretty quickly. Obviously, I can do the Kinglong search if I want to. So we'll go ahead and before we do that, we will we will go ahead and activate the Kinglong. We will search out the Lao Lao, add that to my hand. we will synchro for 9. We will go ahead and make now in this scenario you can make a few different things. You could go for the Shen Shen. You could go for Ravenous Crocodile Archithus. I'm going to go for the Shen Shen here just to simplify things and allow for certain other things to happen. We are going to Lao Lao targeting the Shen Shen. We are going to send the Zhuanwu. We are going to summon the Lao Lao. Then we are going to summon back the Lily. We are going to overlay these two. Now you could theoretically go into a Beatrice here, which would open up for interruption. You could go into a Dragonlark Pyren, which can reborn something from the grave. But in order to keep things as on theme as possible, I'm going to go ahead and just make a fan. You would never do this normally. I just want to kind of show how some of these cards work, give you an idea of what you could possibly do with them. So we're looking at, quite a few things in the grave. The King Long you would normally discard a card for, but I don't really have anything in my hand, so it doesn't really matter all that much. Now, normally you would go for a few other things. Maybe I would have gone for a Beatrice, sent a GG, so that I had access to it, so I could, summon it off of the Zhuanwu, get access to it and the Yan Yan, summon a level 6 synchro, keep going, blah blah blah. Maybe I would have gone for the Archithus instead of the Shen Shen, drawn a card, see if I could draw into some more extenders. But, for the most part, I think if I just go activate the Zhuanwu, reborn the Nian Yan effect, or no, reborn the Lulu, Yan Yan effect, summon itself back, overlay these two. You don't normally play it, right? But, again, just to stay on theme, we will summon the Jaja. So, as you can see, I did pretty unoptimal plays, and I was still able to end on a live Chuche because I have 2 banished cards, a Shen Shen, a Fan, and a Jaja. So, I ended on a rank 6, a rank 3, and a level 9 synchro, and I didn't draw a single card over the course of the combo, which I could have done. I didn't try and go for like a rank 9, which you can do now with the new generator. I stayed completely in archetype and still ended on a disruption and a floodgate. So I think that kind of gives you an idea of what you can do with the deck, sort of some of the things that you can combo together, and all of this just off of 2 cards. And those 2 cards could be 3 cards that are all virtual world cards that all interact with each other. So, I hope that this was helpful. The nice thing about virtual world is that it's extremely flexible. You have a lot of options. You have access to level 9 synchros, level 6 synchros. You have access to rank 3s, rank 6s, rank 9s. You even have access to level 12 synchros, which I do play one of in my deck, at least my version. This deck is extremely powerful. The ceiling on the number of summons you can do in a single turn is extremely high. And for the most part, this deck is extremely flexible. You can really make it do whatever you want it to do. And, that's an extremely alluring thing about a deck. So I definitely recommend checking this out. I hope that this was helpful. If there's anything you think I should have talked about that I glossed over or didn't mention, feel free to let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know if you want to see more of these, and I'll see you in the next one.